Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you're enjoying the content, please drop us up, drop a like, and let us know your thoughts below in the comments. Also, please consider supporting our podcast via the link below. It really helps us out.
Rick, welcome back to the World XP podcast. How are you?
I'm well, Eric. Thank you. Honored to be here. I enjoyed our last visit and looking forward to be able to fill in a little more detail and maybe extend the story a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. So for those listening who didn't catch the first episode, we meant to do a chronological kind of what was Rick's life like, and we got maybe, I don't know, only a part of the way through. And so we're back for a part two. And Rick, I know we were planning before on what we were going to talk about, but I've got a little surprise for you. If you don't remember, we got a question from the last guest for you. Last guest is a professional guitarist. He just performed at Madison Square Garden. His question is, what is your go-to song for getting like in the zone? Or do you have a good memory involving that song? Or like, what is one particular song and memory that's associated with? And it could be kind of all of the above or one particular aspect of that.
Okay, well, hard to pick just one because I do use music for my, let's say, emotional support, and it gets me amped up. And maybe a lot of this has to do with the age at which I grew up, but certainly the Rolling Stones and Start Me Up is one that really gets me going and amped up and kind of feeling strong. I'm old school, so Eye of the Tiger would probably be another one.
Oh, it's a classic. Can't go wrong with that one.
And then a more subtle and odd one to pick would be Once in My Lifetime, which was a song written by Anthony Newley. Best performed, I think, by Sammy Davis Jr. And that came from an influence because I have a brother who's 10 years my senior who was in radio. And so I was inundated with Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr. Back in the day. But there's a line in that song that always hits me. And when I have to do something that I feel is bigger than me, it helps me step up. And that is, once in a lifetime, a man knows his moment, one wonderful moment where fate takes his hand. This is my moment, my once in a lifetime. I'm going to do new and great things. And I think it came from an old Broadway show called, something about business. Yeah, in any case. But that's another song that I use. So
it was a great
you may
answer.
not know that song. A lot of your listeners may not know that song. But those would be the three key ones that I've always used to amp me up.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think in terms of if he would know it, speaking for him, I think he would, because one of the things one of the reasons why he was able to perform at Madison Square Garden, he performed on this live comedy show called Kill Tony, and it's all improvised. And so often they're playing music off the cuff, and the whole band just has to be able to know different riffs and melodies and songs like out of nowhere, and somebody will make a reference to a song and they'll play a chord that had like somebody will say like, I don't even know what a good example. Somebody would make a reference to a Journey, and then they play a Journey song like as they're walking out, and it's that quick. And
sure,
so
okay.
I think
then he may very well. He goes.
He might.
He goes
might know.
deep. We
Yeah,
would say.
he does. 100%. So
Great.
at the end of our last conversation, I think maybe a good way to summarize where we were at, or where we left the in-depth portion of what we were talking about, was kind of your transition out of entertainment and into maybe the businessy type world. We'll say out of the hospitality entertainment realm, from restaurants and acting and art and all these things, and into Tony Robbins and business and banking and that sort of stuff. So let's pick up the story. I think last time we touched on, you had gone to the conference and seen Tony Robbins for the first time, and you're like, I need to do this. I think that's where we left off the in-depth portion. Obviously, we touched on some of the other things in kind of quick detail at the end of the last conversation, but I think that's probably a good place to start. So you go to the conference and you need to meet this guy, and what goes on from there?
Well, it was a bit odd in the sense that I had seen what they called infomercials back in the day. And coming home from the restaurant late at night and going through my mail, I'd sit there with the TV on, and there was this infomercial with, I think it was Lisa Gibbons, interviewing Tony Robbins. And I thought, I'm in a great place in my life right now. This is the place to really step it up. So often you reach out for something when you're having issues or struggling. And I thought, no, I'm in the best place I've ever been. This would be a great place to leap from. And I'm listening to what he's saying, and it sounds like this could be just what I need. So I sign up. It's not one of those situations where I went with a couple of friends. I went by myself, dedicated the weekend to it. And I show up that first afternoon. It was a Friday afternoon where it begins. Go through the registration, and I walk into the ballroom, which had at that time about 500 and some odd people in it. A small audience for Tony these days, but and the music's blasting. It's rock and roll music. It's blasting. The air conditioning was down to like 55 degrees. And for any of your listeners who have been to a Tony Robbins event, they're chuckling right now because they know he always keeps it kind of at polar levels with the temperature. Everything is done strategically, but I thought for sure, as I'm seeing people standing up on their chairs, jumping up and down to the music, I'm in the wrong place. I mean, I came for a seminar. I was there in like khaki slacks and a blazer with a button-down collar shirt and a portfolio to take notes in, because that's my idea of what a seminar was, a learning experience. And this was so animated, so over the top. I'm thinking, honestly, it looks like the land of the misfit toys. Well, Tony has got a captivating way with an audience. I've never seen anybody better or more dynamic on stage than Tony Robbins. Inside the first hour, he said a couple things that just like a laser went right into my soul. And we've all heard that expression where you go someplace and it sounds like somebody's speaking just to you. And one of the things that he had said was, you're going to hear a lot of things this weekend, things you'll agree with, things you'll be lapping up because you want to learn them, and you'll find things you disagree with or flat out not interested in. All I ask is that you try it all on. And if on Monday it's like a sweater that doesn't fit, you can take it off, but at least give it the chance. And I thought, well, that's fair enough. And then secondly, he says, now what's really important too is you can sit here and you can listen for 3.5 days and you'll learn something, but you won't retain a lot of it. Now, if you listen and take notes, you're going to retain a lot more. And there are studies to support this. Now, if you listen, take notes, and actively play full out, give it your all, then you're going to retain more than 90% of what you learn. And I thought, I had a little, come to meet me moment in that, in the sense that I thought, I don't know if I ever really played full out. And this zoned right into me. I mean, this was something I needed to hear. I think in sports as a kid, high school, college, it was always a matter if you had to run a lap, hey, there was no need to be out in front. You just don't want to be last. So mix in the pack somewhere. And I thought what I really did was I cheated myself. And I, in doing so, excuse that noise, that little ambient noise. What I didn't know is that if I had just really excelled and tried to be in the front of the pack, what my performance as an athlete might have been different. So I was kind of the also ran. This idea of playing full out, and I said, you know what? It's time for me to do that. As I said, I'm in a great place in my life. If I want to stretch and get further, I'm going to give it my all. So next thing you know, I'm clapping like everybody else in this room, and I'm leaping up and down, and I'm letting the music get into me and drive me. And what you learn, certainly as you start to understand that human behavior, nothing is done at a Tony Robbins seminar by mistake. Everything is strategically planned. The temperature to help keep you awake and keep you vibrant. The music to stimulate you and move you through moods one way or the other. His dynamics on the microphone, his ability to be able to use the microphone to talk to you very intimately at some points and times, and other times really slam it home. And he taught me how to prowl on a stage. So as a speaker, to never stand stationary behind a podium, but to really prowl the stage and put your physiology into it. Well, these were new dynamics to me. So this was exciting and really invigorating. At the close of this seminar, they give you the opportunity, of course, for the upsell. And the upsell was that if you got a lot out of this weekend and you're looking for more, there's a whole university you can sign up for. And they run this video. Now, the video is taking you to all these tropical places and showing you different places he's done events. Tony doesn't do a program in a mundane place. It's never out in a prairie somewhere. It was always in Hawaii or St. Thomas, all these beautiful locations. So that, of course, lures you in. But I also touched on doing a program on finance. That was powerful. We're going to teach you about health, emotions, relationship, leadership. He went through all these things. And then the caveat was a marketing deal. For the first 50 people who sign up, you're going to get to swim with dolphins in Cancun, Mexico. We've arranged it for the first 50 people to sign up. Okay, well and good. I had to be one of those first 50 people. Now, this whole program was 10,000 plus for a year, 18 months of programs, 4 different locations, 4 different programs throughout that period of time. I had no idea how I was going to pay for this, but I had just gotten a gold American Express card, which, as you know, is not a credit card. It's a charge card. And I said, I think I'm going to learn in this program what I need to know to pay for this. And I went on that trust, and I went to the back of the room. I was the first one back there. We had done a little episode during the course of this weekend called a Dickens pattern. And it's called the Dickens pattern really because what they do is they have you visit your past. And so you start to see those things that have perhaps gotten under your skin. Takes you to the present, and then the promise of what the future could be if you take the right steps. And in the course of that, one of the images is find yourself in a comfortable chair and see a sign that you've made the right choice and something's working for you. Well, in my imagination, I had myself out on the bowsprit of a sailboat. I always loved being out on the water. And that bowsprit, you know how it kind of goes up and down and through the waves. My legs are straddling it. And this is all through a visualization. And all of a sudden, a dolphin pops up out of the water, turns to me, as they will do sometimes, and winks. Now, I don't know if dolphins ever wink. In this case, he did. And I took that to represent my dad, who had never really seen any of the great successes in my life, acknowledging the fact, and get a little choked up here, we're talking about dad, and that here was the approval. I'm proud of you. So after this, when they offer up the first 50 people get to swim with dolphins, boom, like a bullet, I'm at the back counter with my credit card in hand going, I got to do this. So I signed up, and that started the journey. Now, until the first program came along, there were other events that he had scheduled. And what I was able to do was volunteer at them. So you'd be an usher one time, you'll be, doing registration and that sort of thing. So I did these different tasks, and people saw that I was really integrating the skills, techniques, strategies, and learnings that were being taught. And so I was always asked to do a bit more and a bit more. Until finally, during a Dickens pattern at a future event, I was asked to be a trainer. And I said, but I'm not a trainer. There was still that.
Do you have a few examples of some of the things that you learned that you implemented that somebody took notice of as you were volunteering?
Well, I think probably most boldly was to jump in when you see something happening. When I say that, I mean, it's if somebody's struggling or having issues, or somebody's deciding, this isn't for me, being able to step up, get right in there, and help them understand where they could gain value, or help them resolve what their pushback is. Because oftentimes, if we're uncertain about something or we're a little scared by something, the first option is really to go with a no. This isn't for me. No, I don't want to do that. And really, what that may be is exactly the bridge they need to cross. There's an old expression that says the cave you fear to enter is the one that holds the prize you seek. And so it was really helping people. It wasn't like trying to twist arms or do anything like that. People were free to leave anytime they wanted. But I learned how to interact with people and how to help them get their outcome. To me, that was key to understanding that you could really help people have what they want. And so that was principle. There's another thing that Tony would teach that was called the triad. And this is something that fundamentally we're all doing all the time. And the triad was the symbol of a triangle, of course, the foundation of it being our physiology. Because everything we do is based on the energy we can create. So if we're slump-shouldered, let's say, and looking down and breathing shallow, we're going to have a very different feeling than if our shoulders back, we're upright, we're dynamic and strong. So you can change the way you feel in a heartbeat. Where some people, you'll hear them say, well, this is just who I am. And the truth is, it's who you are by default. And you can live a life by default or by design. And I would say that's the core thing that I learned from all my years with Tony, that life is either done by default or by design, and you get to choose. You are the architect of your life. Yes, there are some preset indicators in our DNA, family upbringing, yet that doesn't explain the fact that some people overcome these things. You get the person who struggled, who didn't have parents, who was an orphan, or came here with $100 in their pocket from a foreign country, didn't know the language, and they excel. It's because they live a life by design. We all are the architects of our future. And we have that ability to be able to manage those things that get thrown at us. We can't pick what's going to happen, but we can pick how we're going to respond to it. And that's what's most important. So as difficulties or successes come our way, we have the choice of being, how do we make this so it's truly beneficial? And how do I get to the next level? And once you realize that those choices are your own, sure, they're harder for some than for others, yet it's critical to know you have the choices. And life is, I've always said this in my practice to all of my clients, resistance is your friend. Oftentimes, resistance is what will turn people away. They come against too much resistance, and it's like, this is not for me. I said, but think about it. An eagle doesn't soar in the sky until it cracks through the resistance of a shell at some point in time. A butterfly doesn't have those beautiful wings fluttering from flower to flower until it breaks through the chrysalis, the cocoon. We go to the gym and we lift weights, a resistance against our muscles to build that muscle. So the real secret's to embrace resistance. When something comes up and it's up against you, to figure out, how do I go to get through this, under it, over it, or around it? But what I want is on the other side, and I'll settle for nothing less. And I think that that's a critical lesson for us all. And yeah. I know I even keep reminding myself of it, because you're never done. You're never done learning or stretching.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult sometimes, I think, when people face some resistance and they don't know what's on the other side. Like, they don't know. You've seen the pictures of people digging a long tunnel and then they stop one shovel away from the thing on the other side. Like, because then you also run into the question of like, instead of continuing to push against the resistance, maybe there's another path that is better. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're running away from the resistance, but maybe you need to change course a little bit. And so navigating between those two, I think, can be a bit of a challenge, because people I think sometimes will say, well, I need to change course, and really they're just running away from resistance. But sometimes they really do need to change course. And I think that's an interesting dynamic to consider. Was that something that you were able to like help people through within those seminars and those courses and stuff as well?
I
Like
do.
like
I,
do you have maybe like guidelines, or I don't know if guidelines is the right word, but like, okay, if this is happening, maybe change course, but if that's happening, maybe you keep pushing, like, type general things?
I think, yeah, Eric, I do think that that's the great conundrum in life. Should I stay or should I go? And I think those were the lyrics of a song. In fact, should I stay or should I go? And it's always what we're up against is facing the idea: is this part of the plan? Is this what I need to do? Is this the price I'm going to need to pay to get the prize? Because another great principle through that Tony period was we're all trying to move away from pain and towards pleasure. And the only time we will accept pain as a favorable choice is because it's a familiar pain. Whereas the pleasure may be unfamiliar, and that can be scary. I don't know where it's going. I don't know what's on the other side of the next swing of the pickaxe. And I don't know what's in that cave, so to speak. So yes, I think that's always the question that needs to be asked. And where we get to be kind of a discerning factor in that, where we get to really kind of drill through that, is to see, is this part of your dream? Because if it's part of your dream, if it's part of your passion, if it's what you really want, then you have to run the gauntlet. And maybe it's about being more, what's the word I'm looking for? Perhaps more creative, more driven to say, is this the best way? Maybe I don't need to go through this obstacle. Maybe I can find a way around it, under it, or a more creative choice. Yet I think to answer your question, it's always about, what does the prize mean to you? If this is your dream, why would you quit now? Yeah. If it's something you want, even if it's something you've never had and it's unfamiliar to you, how much do you want it? And that's what determines the course, because a lot of people didn't take the most effective routes to get to where they were. Sometimes there was a lot of bad road, and I think that lends to the story. We all have a story, and we can either let our story drive us, or we can drive and create the story. So again, it always comes down to choices. Tony's one of his more famous quotes, I think, is, your destiny is determined by your decisions. So with every decision you make, you turn left on a corner instead of right, it changes things. People sometimes talk about the butterfly effect, that if a butterfly flutters its wings on one side of the globe, it affects something to some degree on the other side. I've read that story. I know that story. I don't always believe that story, but I think there's a difference in what we choose to do and how we choose to do it. We don't always have to take the best road if we're committed to the outcome.
Yeah. So, okay. So you've jumped in, you're volunteering at these events, you're in the course, you're on the way to swim with dolphins at some point.
Yes.
What is the next sort of steps for you? How do you become more integrated? Um, Kind of what happened? Well, first, how was the dolphins? But second, like, what happens after that?
Well, the Dolphins were a fun story. And I'm sure if there are any Robbins people who were there at that time, they'll chuckle at this. I arrived in Cancun, Mexico for this event several days in advance, only to find out that I had been scheduled to swim with the Dolphins the day before I got there. So I was, to say the least, I became unresourceful. and I was livid that this could possibly happen. And I drove that message home. But that was also part of the learning, was to understand some things don't work the way they're supposed to in life. And when that's the case, you have to find a way. And I learned from that process, that you really have to be sensitive to what other people are experiencing too. And I think we've all heard the expression, it's attributed to a number of people, but I think in truth, it was Eleanor Roosevelt who said, "To whom much is given, much shall be asked." Now, people often think of that in terms of money or success. I think it also applies to awareness. So when you have an epiphany, when you feel that awareness, you now have a responsibility to react to that. And I had that awareness that I had disrupted rapport with some of the people there that I had expectations of. And expectations lead to frustrations in most cases. So I humbled myself and made myself present to those people and apologized for what I did. I don't think it justified what they did, but it made me clear the slate, if you will. You know, it was poorly set up. It didn't operate really well in the beginning. They had their challenges, and that was coming out on me. But the lesson learned was rich. To be able to turn around and say, listen, I have an awareness now of what's going on, and I have a responsibility to address that. So I sought them out, apologized, and it was heartfelt. That said, moving forward, as we did these different events, so I did ultimately get to swim with the dolphins, but it was at the end of the event, not the beginning. And it was a great experience. However, I think what was really wonderful was coming into my own during this event, learning these different things. I was soaking up everything that was said like a sponge. I had, notebooks that were this thick of notes that I took from this program. And I was hungry because it was that operational manual that we don't get in life. It was about how we can change, how we can re-engineer the life we think we were handed to become the life we choose and really desire. So I attended every event. And next thing you know, I got tapped on the shoulder, as is something that happens from time to time in my life. And I was asked to come on the marketing team because they recognized I was using the skills, tools, techniques, and strategies that they were teaching. And this would be a great demonstration and the ability to use those people to help them make a choice that would change their lives. So then I went on the road. And inside of about 18 months, I was on the road for Tony up to 270 days a year. I worked for him. I got paid well. And I broke sales records. I set my own sales records and exceeded them. And I got to travel through a lot of the world. I would go to Australia twice a year, Europe multiple times a year. And I was chosen really to come in before an event, help them set up the event and structure it, but also stay after several weeks to coach people who had been to the event and wanted more. And in many cases, it was a decision, do I want to continue on with this? And so it was marketing other Tony programs. Otherwise, it would be also helping them resolve some of the questions, issues, or things holding them back. And so by coaching them, and that's where I started to really make my bones as a coach. And that's led to years later, I was with Tony in that regard for about 8 years. Ultimately being selected for a new program that Tony did called the Platinum Partnership. And it was created kind of in a morning on the island of, I think we were in Kona on the big island of Hawaii. And the head of marketing comes out and goes, Rick, you need to get in the room and listen to Tony. This is how things are done a lot of times in Tony's world. You need to get in there and listen to Tony because we were just in the green room and we created this program. He's going to market it from the stage, and you are the one he wants people directed to answer their questions and talk about it. I said, what's the program? She goes, I don't know. That's why you have to be in the room because Tony's going to work off the cuff. He's going to be very impromptu with this. And what he did, I think, because I was older than a lot of my colleagues in that I had an experience of life that had me in front of a lot of very important people, with the restaurant world and the entertainment world, things of that nature. And he trusted and knew, he and his attorney, a fellow named Sam Georges, knew that they could put me in front of anybody. And that was key. So they picked me and I became the first platinum coach.
That's a very underrated thing, or like an underrated trust factor. Not that they trust you, but that if somebody says, yeah, you're like, for example, for my soccer team, we're part of a giant club that has like 10,000 kids. And our coach will say sometimes he'll bring some of us to the youth practices. He'll be like, I know you, I can put you guys in front of the parents and you guys will be well spoken, et cetera, et cetera. It's like a very underrated thing that you don't really, that I never noticed until somebody mentioned it to me. I was like, oh, I'll just do this thing. But it's like, well, I'm not going to put the other person over there because they might say something, do whatever. So just to point that out. Anyways, continue.
Thank you. And yeah, I can appreciate that too, because what I understood was what I had, something I mentioned earlier. This was about all you're selling is certainty. And on a certain level, I had sold them the certainty that I could be trusted out there and that I had the skill set. I had taken it all to heart and I would implement it and I would work from their philosophy. In other words, I wasn't going to go out there like a cowboy and just make up stuff. And I think that was critical to that. And ultimately, the head of marketing and the attorney sat down with me one day. We were at an event in Palm Springs and said, Tony would like you to go to Europe for 3 months. And we're going to pay you. You'll have a per diem. But what we need to do is we want to help manage the European promoters because they are selling ramshackle. They're just doing whatever they can to sell tickets to the events. And we need to teach them the philosophy. We need to teach them the principles. We want to rein them in and manage that entity over there. And we feel that you're the one to do that. Well, certainly this was a great honor. And there was a part of me that had to keep my emotions down because I wanted to be strategic with this. And I said, well, I haven't had a vacation in like 2 years. And yeah, I'm in all these fabulous places, but I'm working day in, day out. It's like I've never had a chance to relax. So I was hoping to go on vacation. So they said, well, how about if we let you have a vacation for 2 weeks when you get over there? Now, you won't be paid for that, but your plane flight, that'll all be covered. And then you can go to work for that. And I said, well, let me think about it. Because at the time I was single. I said, I don't speak foreign languages. I don't know if it's a good idea. Wink, wink, wink. And I'm thinking 3 months in Europe, paid, expense account, and I'll be with these people who are really positive and want to learn, want to grow. And I'm here to help them excel at what they want to do. So of course I said, yes, it was a matter of just wanting to up the ante a little bit. And I was over there for 3 months. And I said, I can set up my office where? In Brussels, if you like. How about Milan? If you want, wherever it seems appropriate, we trust you to make those decisions. So I was in Paris for a while. I was in Italy for a while. I was in Geneva for a while. It was a wonderful 3 months. And I met a gal there who was American, was quite a surprise to me, who I actually wound up falling in love with, and we got married. And although that didn't work out, the experience was just really one of, this is my life. Working with Tony was my life, and the people around me were part of this. So it was a wonderful family and a great experience. And that carried on till the year 2000, really. And then in the year 2000, I probably should have left a little before that because I had hit the ceiling. I wasn't going to make any more. There wasn't more for me really to do. And the situation came up and it was just like, okay, we had this mutual agreement. It was time to move on. And so that's when I set out. Because of the Platinum Partnership, some of the high-level clients that we had, these were people that were paying upwards of $70,000 a year to be part of this Platinum Partnership. Plus
What is
expense.
what is the Platinum Partnership? Or like what was the program? What sorts of, obviously you just mentioned the price tag, especially at that time would be, I don't know, 100K plus today. It's a lot of money, of course. So what sorts of people, like what are you offering to these people that they're like, yes, I'll pay you this amount of money for this program? Like what, like, and how would you go about selling it to them? Like, hey, you should pay this money.
Well, as I said, I had that opportunity where the head of marketing said, get in the room and listen to Tony talk about this. And what he was creating at that time was something specific for the high net worth client. Somebody who's already proven they're successful. However, no matter what level of success people have and to what degree, there's always something they need to work on. There's always something that's eating at them a little bit. And so Tony created this Platinum Partnership, was to have close proximity to Tony. You'd have 4 events that you would go on with just this group, which was going to be at that time no more than 100 people. And so you had this intimate experience, 4 events throughout the year where you would all get together. Plus, in between those events, you would have coachings and learnings from Tony. You would receive all of his books at that point in time, tapes or videos, and you would receive all the material, was all included. And I believe it was 10,000 of that money that you were paying was going to go to the foundation to help feed hungry and help bring these kinds of programs into impoverished areas. So it was a very intimate and also altruistic program. This was for those who could afford it, who wanted to take their game to the next level and resolve issues and be able to give back themselves through a focused effort.
What are the personalities like? Because I can imagine if you get to a point where you're willing to fork over that sort of money, you're used to being in charge of things, you're used to having people do what you ask or want, depending on the personality of the individual. You're used to not having to answer to people, and you get all of those types in a room. Are there clashes, or are there, right? Because you're kind of telling them maybe things that they don't want to hear, or maybe they already know deep down, or 'cause some of that I would assume would be some level of self-reflection, which maybe doesn't happen as often if you're super busy and you're doing all these things. But what's it like? I can imagine there would be some level of, maybe, I don't know if tension is the right word, but it would be different than a normal event when you have people just signing up and wanting to go get exposed to that for the first time. It's a different type of person. What can you describe kind of what it's like to be in that situation, especially if you're coaching somebody like that?
Well, certainly there was a variety of personality styles, because some of these people had newly acquired success. Others had been, what we would think of as seasoned professionals. Yet all of them had something in common. There was something they wanted that they didn't have, or there was something they had that they didn't want. And when I say that, so, a lot of people are very focused on their business, their success. And what suffers a lot of times are relationships, the values and things. They're doing what they do well, but it may not be what they love. So they're missing out on their passion because they're finding success down a different path. But I've always wanted to paint, or I've always wanted to sing, or I've always wanted, those are kind of superficial answers, but somebody's always got something that's eating at them. And so how I would present this to some of them too is I said, think about this. If you are very successful and all your friends are people you've known most of your life or family, and there's a certain part of that that is greatly respected and appreciated, And there's also another part of it that they just don't understand. So when you get to that point where you can buy your first airplane, and you are all excited because you've made this decision, you're going to buy your first airplane, and you tell your friends and neighbors, family, you're going to buy an airplane, they're like, oh, well, isn't that nice? I mean, that may be the underlying message. They may say, oh, wow, that's wonderful, that's great, but inside they're feeling like that. I said, so what would it be like if you could be with a small group of people and exchange ideas with maybe the guy who's already bought his fifth plane, and he can resonate with the fact of what it's like to buy your first plane? What if it's about knowing the pitfalls, that they're not the same as when you bought your first car? This is a whole different level of the game. So you will be in a network of people who understand what it is you're experiencing. And to have a network like that, a community of successful people who can mentor each other, now therein lies some great value. And would you agree that you could benefit from having close proximity to Tony? Instead of being 1 in 1,000 in an audience, you now have a small, intimate audience, and he's appealing to whatever it is you need. Not from a standpoint of utilizing that, but he's always staying a step ahead because he has these people that he coaches that are at a significantly high level. Tony gets $1 million a year to be a private coach, and there's a waiting list for that. Yet he has friends that have been mentored by him through the years, and people who have mentored him. And all of that is a wealth of experience that he can share with this intimate group who are either aspiring to be or in that circle now. So it becomes this very intimate mastermind group where everybody's exchanging ideas. So I remember at that time, without mentioning any names, of course, there was a fellow who was very deep into cybersecurity. Well, other people in the group were setting up businesses, and wow, they could certainly benefit from what he knows about cybersecurity as they're structuring their empires or their businesses and moving forward. There were other people who were dentists, there were financial people, there were people who were entrepreneurs, people who were multi-level marketers, all who had made their bones in a particular sector of the marketplace, but may not know a lot about the other sectors. So to be able to teach this group, let's say, about investments was a whole different category than taking the general public of, say, 1,600 people in a ballroom and trying to teach them finances. It was done on both levels through Tony's world. And I think it's one of the places where Tony really excels. He knows his audience. He knows who he's talking to, and he knows how to deliver what you need. So that was always great. And so through that group, kind of as a segue to the next portion, I guess.
What was it like going from those people to engineers and teaching them how to give presentations?
Well, it was just as fascinating to me. I mean, maybe I'm easily fascinated, but that group of people was great. It was wonderful to work with them, and we did some fabulous things. We went in Aspen skiing for 4 days. We went to Paris, stayed in Paris for a couple days where we got voice lessons, singing lessons, and then we got on the Orient Express for a trip overnight to Venice, Italy. And then we stayed in Venice, Italy for several days. And there was one humorous little anecdote I should add. We were out in these gondolas at one point in time, floating in the Venice Canal. This was an event pre-dinner, and the dinner was going to be at a palazzo and in Venice. So we're all out in these gondolas. Tony, who is 6'7" and has some mass as a man, stands up in the gondola and yells to the production, the head of production, "I thought I requested singing gondoliers. The gondoliers aren't singing." So we're concerned Tony's going to tip over this gondola. The head of production turns to her Italian connection who was helping her structure and set up these things. She goes, "Oh, the singing gondoliers will be at dinner tonight. They're a group." So she didn't acquire singing gondoliers. She acquired the singing gondoliers, which were a group who were going to entertain us at dinner that night. Funny little side story.
Oh, that's funny.
But those were the kinds of events that we had. So certainly, the night on the Orient Express was celebratory. It was a fabulous experience. It's really a first-class trip for anybody to consider. Yet we also had like a workshop. Tony was always teaching. So we'd have that. And he brought in a voice coach to help us in Paris with the voice. And then we also had someone to help us with painting while we're in Venice. And it was a fabulous time. So one of the clients who attended these trips was one of the people certainly that I coached through the process. And when I left the Robbins world in 2000, he approached me several months later and said, "Would you be interested in helping me take engineers in the aerospace business and upgrading their presentation skills using the human behavioral and psychology skills you learned from Tony and drawing from your own background as an actor and co-starring in 12 feature films and episodics and sitcoms?" And I said, "Sure, I could do that. I'd be happy to do that, John." And
They need it for sure.
well, and the issue came around now to how many engineers are we talking about? And I'm thinking, 5, 6 engineers. We have 163 engineers at Lockheed Martin. And we're working to acquire a contract with the government for $6.6 billion. And we're going to build 4 weather satellites over the next 10 years. And I said, "John, I don't know anything about aerospace." He says, "No, I know that." He goes, "That's not important. You don't need to know what they're talking about. You just need to help them with how they're talking about it." And I said, "Okay." And there was a colleague of mine who actually had worked with John before. And so the two of them brought me in to work with them. And we sat down. I remember the first day at Lockheed Martin. And everybody's introducing themselves. Now, this entire team of engineers was kind of brought together for this project from different places. So one gentleman gets up and talks about his 16 years with the Apollo program. Someone else gets up and talks about they're developing the Hubble telescope. Another person gets up and talks about the space station and their what they call legacy or heritage with the space station. Another group were there that had gone up to fix the Hubble telescope. And then John says, "And I brought these 2 fellas in to teach you guys how to speak." Well, immediately you see a room full of engineers go like this, folded arms, blackberries come out, "You're going to teach me how to speak." And so he throws the ball to us. And I get up and introduce myself. Everybody's talked about all their years in this business, their legacy, their heritage. It's brilliant. I respect it all. I said, "I've been in aerospace now, let me see, about 45 minutes. And I said, and I don't know the difference between an algorithm and a logarithm, except I believe they're spelled differently." And of course, everybody kind of chuckled. And I was just taking the mick on myself. I said, "But I do know about performance. And I know that Lockheed Martin brought you folks in with the intent of winning this contract. And if they don't win this contract, many of you are going to be out on the street again." And I said, "I had the good fortune of working on the Olympics in 1984. And I bet many of you can remember some of those gold medal winners. Greg Louganis in diving, Carl Lewis on track." I said, "There were some magnificent people. They won gold medals. Can you tell me who won the silver medals?" And of course, everybody was blank. And I said, the difference sometimes between gold and silver is 100th of a second. I said, so if you miss the mark on this, it's really critical to get it right. I'm here not to teach you how to speak. I'm here to bring out the best speaker that's within you. And that's what we're here to do, and that's our commitment. And that got a lot of people's attention. However, their commitment was really more to their science, their engineering, and their presentation. So getting them to come in for some speaker coaching was always the last thing on their mind. And at one point, one of the doctors, one of the head engineers in the program, I was working with him, and he had a stuttering issue. Now, this was long before the movie The King's Speech. And it was difficult for him. It had been that way for his whole life. And I told him, and I said, listen, I'd like to help you get rid of that if you're interested. And I will stay as long as it takes tonight to do that. And he's, this has been an issue for me my whole life. I said, I understand. And it must be hard. I said, and we can get you through that. If we work together, we'll get you through that. We stayed till about 12:30, 1 o'clock that night. And it was on a Friday of a long weekend. And he came back on Tuesday and he says to me, you can't believe how you've changed my relationship with my son. Well, certainly it brought a tear to my eye. But I said, you're using this at home? I said, that's extra. This contract is for here. We had a good chuckle. But people saw the difference in his performance. And next thing you know, they're signing up for their speaker coaching lessons. And Joe, my good friend, and was one of the people who brought me in on this contract along with John, we wound up meeting with people left and right. And the only reason Lockheed Martin didn't get that contract is because their bookkeeping had, let's just say, they lost it for other reasons. But that was great. And I did that for 3 years with John in proposal management process. I worked for Raytheon from there, because normally they would use people like that came out of Toastmasters, to help them coach this stuff. And Toastmasters is fine. It's just not the highest level of coaching for speakers. It's more kind of the Hallmark card. It represents it. I'm not putting it down by any means. It's served a lot of people very well. Yet they needed to have a much higher level of understanding human behavior and the dynamics of presentations. And so we were able to deliver that. And therefore I was hired out to Raytheon, TRW, even the Strategic Command. I spent some time in the Dakotas with them. And I did that for 3 years. And it was very interesting. It was fascinating, the things that I learned. Those weather satellites aren't just all about making sure we have a nice Labor Day weekend. There's a lot else going on up there. So sometimes when they would get to what they call the black project parts of it, I would be asked to take a few days off with pay, and I'd go play golf, or go home.
Yeah.
And then come back, because there are certain things I just didn't have clearance to hear.
How was that adjustment for you? Even like Tony Robbins, right? Some of the individuals that are in the platinum program, I'm sure, were involved in some of your previous industries, entertainment or hospitality or whatever. So that kind of transition makes a little bit of sense. To go from that into military contracting is a completely different world. Not limited to, but how they work, how the companies are structured, how the money flows in and out, right? It's government contracting instead of fundraising and all these other things. How is that adjustment for you to kind of jump into that?
Well, it's a very good question, Eric. The good news is a lot of that didn't apply to me. So, yes, it's a very different world for sure. Yet the human dynamic is really common to all of us. And so what I had to do was really sit down with these people, listen to what they were saying, how they were delivering it, and show them how to make it more dynamic how to make it more impactful. And that's the same whether you're dealing with someone on stage who's doing a seminar for 40 financial advisors, or someone who's talking to 200 senators and generals from the military about a contract. Now, the topic will be different. The words, the language, the uniforms, that'll all be different, but that's not my world. My world is creating that human dynamic, that connection, and making sure that they have the deliverables, that's their job, what the deliverables are. My job is to create the vehicle to have them be delivered as effectively as possible. So there was so much of that to work with. Because as you know, engineers would rather work in a room with 3 monitors and no windows than to have to go out and speak publicly on a stage to 200 people who are scrutinizing everything they're saying. So It was about creating comfort, creating certainty, again, because that's the principal thing they're going to be delivering. If they can deliver certainty to these generals and senators, then they've got the contract.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've done it again with time. Okay, so I think we talked a little bit about the American Express stuff last time. Let's jump to your own coaching practice and the hypnotherapy piece,
Sure.
because we didn't get to touch on that at all last time, and I want to make sure that we dive in a sufficient amount to that. And as we were talking offline before, kind of the American Express was a similar sort of instance to the Lockheed situation. You get tapped on the shoulder, and you're kind of doing a similar thing where you're making the human connection and you're selling a product, and not that there's nothing to be gleaned from that, but I think the entrepreneurial piece and the hypnotherapy piece is something that is a little bit different from the other subject. There's a little bit more there for people to take away. So let's jump to there. So
Okay.
you want to start your own business. Where has the market dried up for you? Obviously, I think during that time it would be a few years post 2008 financial crash. Is that kind of the catalyst for that? There's not really a market for your services, and so you got to go on your own, or like how did that realization idea come to be that you were going to start your own thing?
The transition really was kind of forced upon me in some ways. And yeah, it wasn't so much to the 2008 financial crisis, but it was to the aftermath or the fallout from that. Because all of a sudden the value of treasuries started to diminish. You know, the yield on treasuries was going down. And that was the instrument that most of these insurance companies like American Express and Allianz were using to back and structure the vehicles they were using for people's retirement, which were primarily variable annuities, indexed annuities, fixed index annuities, and such. So these had to be all backed with something, and they were using treasuries. When the treasuries were getting really lean, they were no longer able to do that with the robustness they had prior. And so that said, it made it really difficult for them. And we were selling, there was a small team of us that were selling too much of this too fast. And so what they did was they decided to trim the field down. The case with American Express is they only marketed to their own brokers. So they cut out the outside broker dealers and bankers, and they just delivered to their own financial advisors. So that was all well and good. They were called Ameriprise. Ameriprise Financial was the division of American Express, and then American Express spun that off. So that was how they addressed that transition. They just cut out that division. So I was out on the street, if you will, for about 3-4 months when I was interviewing with Prudential, Transamerica, Hartford, all the big insurance companies. And finally, Allianz, who at that time was the second largest money manager in the world next to BlackRock. And they reached out to me and said, we're putting together a small team to go out and not only train our financial wholesalers on fixed indexed annuities, but also train with them their clients, who are the brokers, financial planners, financial analysts. So I was kind of a train the trainers kind of a position with that. And there were, I believe, 5 of us initially, and then later 4. And in 14 months, we hit the 5-year goal. So we really excelled at what we were doing. And they said, quite frankly, we're sorry to say this, we've got a nice severance package for you, but we don't need you anymore. And so I continued to search for new positions. And I saw the market was pretty dry at that point in time. So that was 2012. And now in 2012, the market was pretty dry in that category. So I thought, well, what have I been doing all along? You know, I had to sit there, you know, while I was with Tony Robbins, I was coaching people, either prospective clients or trainers or high net worth clients. Then I moved on to the financial community, where what I was doing was I was coaching brokers, financial planners, financial advisors. So I'm going to do what I've been doing, only now I'm going to hang a shingle and do my own. So that was when I created Your Optimum Life, which is the name of my business. And I went on coaching people, taking on coaching clients, you know, a few at first, then more and more. I would go out and speak to groups, and that was always beneficial because I would always elicit or have a few people who would come up to me and say, hey, listen, I would like to learn more about what you're doing, or I would like to get coached by that. And then one day I saw an article for a school called the Hypnosis Motivational Institute. And they had some free classes of an evening. And I thought, well, I'd like to learn that for myself, you know.
How quickly after you've opened your own business that the hypnotherapy stuff
That
pops
was
up?
almost 3 years later.
Okay, so let's go through kind of the maybe growing pains, or maybe not growing pains if there weren't so many, but of you opening your own business, the adjustment from things that you didn't have to worry about before, like business status and filings and taxes for all these different things. How did you learn how to do all that? Did you have were you able to tap into your network of people that you'd coached before to get some help with that? How was that transition for you?
Well, the good news is, I mean, as a coach, you can just kind of hang a shingle, or, you know, that's an expression, but you can just open up a business. Now, it depends on the state you're in, because in some states it will require a licensing or a certification. Many times there are coaching organizations out there that the feeling is if you're a part of that organization, you have more authority. Well, I had learned something very early on from Tony Robbins, who did not go to college, who did not have any certifications, who did not have, he said, you know, my certification is results. He goes, I get results. And so I kind of went with that. I mean, I had enough history coaching people that for me, the intent was really to work with the network I had. Because of my experience with Tony Robbins, I knew people internationally. I would continue to attend different people's events, not just Tony's events, but Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer, Dr. Wayne Dyer's events. I learned from a lot of different people, and while you're there, you're networking. So I would acquire clients that way. And there's a very interesting concept of people thinking, well, who's going to listen to me? And the truth is, there's somebody who can only hear it from you. Because although they may take your glasses and put your glasses on, and I heard this metaphor the other day, I liked it a lot. They'll put your glasses on and they go, I can't see through these. And you go, of course not. That prescription's for me. It's not for you. Likewise with people. So if I were to go see Coach Eric, for example, let's put you in that position, I may hear things from you that I've heard 100 times before from other people, but they didn't register with me. But the way you presented it, all of a sudden it clicked. I think what Tony taught was not brand new information. He didn't create it. He had learned it from Jim Rohn and other mentors that he had. So a lot of times we're not creating knowledge, we're the brokers of knowledge. We have gained it along the way. I say life is like a bucket brigade in the sense that we get handed this bucket. It's got stuff in it. We get to use that, and then we hand it on. And so that was kind of how I built my business. Getting out and talking to people being interested in, well, where'd you learn that? What'd you do? Well, this is what I do. Oh, I'd love to do that. So sometimes people would come for one session and done. Other times people would come for a period of time until they had resolved a particular issue. And I have other clients that are just ongoing. I'll see them every week or every 2 weeks. And adding the hypnosis to that, to me, was an important part. So just to rewind a little bit, I attended this free evening class of hypnotherapy, and I thought, this is much deeper than what I had seen in comedy clubs or Vegas acts or in movies or television. This is a true science of the subconscious mind. We often hear people say you only use 10% of your mind's capacity. In truth, your conscious mind is about 8 to 10% of your mind's capacity. The rest of it is your subconscious. And that's the root of your beliefs, your feelings, your emotions. They all live there. This is kind of the library of your experience. It starts as early as in the womb. That sounds funny to some people, but there's only two fears we're born with. One is loud noises, and the other is a fear of falling. Those are both survival based. So a loud noise threatens our survival as an infant, or particularly even in the womb. Let's say, a chair gets thrown across the room. That child in that womb picks up some of that vibration, and from early on, we are always hearing the melody of messages long before we hear the lyrics. So for that period of time, from the natal period till about 8 or 9 years old, we're a sponge. We're just absorbing everything that we're learning. The only two fears we have are the loud noises and falling. And that's because we're programmed to survive. And everything we're going to do, we're going to cry for food, we're going to cry for affection, we're going to whine, we're going to giggle. Those are all predicated on our ability to want to thrive and survive. And then around 8 or 9 years old, we start to develop our critical thinking filter. And that's where we evaluate. This is why I always kind of smirk when I see an adult lean over and ask a child, why did you do that? Because a child has no concept as to why. Now, if you get down on a knee with the child and you look them in the eye and you go, how are you feeling? Now they can answer you. I feel sad. I feel hungry. I feel ignored. I wanted their company. I wanted this. I wanted that. That's what they understand. So it's a whole different dynamic than what we think as adults. We think, well, they're just small adults. They're developing creatures. So that understanding and knowing how to work with that became really paramount to me, because through the Tony Robbins years, I certainly saw a lot of people who came into an event, got hyped up. Wow, going to change the world. They get out there, and on Monday, they're telling everybody about this great event they were at for the weekend. And Tuesday, they're telling a few of their close friends about just how important it is. You got to do this. And by Wednesday, they're talking to a couple of people about it. By Thursday, their own life has started to blend back in, and they're dealing with their challenges again. They got it all on a conscious level. But what didn't happen for them was they weren't able to, what's the word I want to do, incorporate it on a subconscious level. Now, Tony does use that tool, and he teaches that in a lot of ways, but some people don't get it. So in 3 or 4 days, they're coming out, they got the information, they're just not really designed to implement it also right away. So I thought adding the subconscious piece and knowing how to work on it from that level, that makes it change for everything. And that's why people stop smoking 100 times, but they only quit when they've gone through hypnosis. A lot of people stop eating garbage and junk foods, but they're back at it 6 months or a while, and because they haven't made the shift on an emotional level. And when that happens, now you've got a big enough why. That's what creates the leverage for you. The understanding, no, that's just not me anymore. I can tell you, even on a personal level, it was just about 2 weeks ago, through conversations and influence with some other people that I trust, they delivered certainty. I cut out bread. Now, I'm Italian. Bread is a staple in my diet, but I cut out bread and pasta, and I know I'm doing it at least maybe for a while. Maybe it'll stick forever. But I was able to do that because of going in and dealing with it on an emotional level at its core. And that's what makes the shift. So having the knowledge, we always hear the expression, knowledge is power. I say, nay, nay. Action is power. Knowledge is passive power. It doesn't become kinetic until you integrate it and you make it your own.
Yeah. So if somebody was to be a fly on the wall during a session, a hypnotherapy session, what happens? And then also maybe something that I'm curious about, the first time that you used it, were you nervous as well? You're like, oh, I'm going to mess this up and they're going to be sleeping for forever. I don't know.
Well, the good news is when you're learning it, you learn how to take people out of trance. The other part of it too is no one stays in the trance forever.
No, of course.
So,
Yeah.
so ultimately they're going to wake up, and I always get that question from a client, that's new, or somebody who's talking to me about potentially being a client. You're not going to make me quack like a duck, are you? Said, well, if that's what you want, I can do that. But I don't think that's what you came to me for. So yeah, people are influenced by their imagination, of course. And their imagination comes from what they have seen in comedy clubs or nightclubs or a Vegas act or in the movies or television. And it's not really what hypnosis is. Now, when you see somebody who's really doing hypnosis, they are getting you to a heightened state of relaxation. And so that's what we do. I take you into a heightened state of relaxation so that you are still on a conscious level hearing all of my words. Yet what we call your critical thinking filter has been softened to allow this information in. So if we were to think of this as the 3 tiers, actually there's 4. So the top tier being the conscious mind. That's there to help you decide, do I cross the street now? Do I look both ways? Is it safe? That's conscious thinking. Then we have this critical thinking. And that's like a filter that says these things that are coming in, this guy just came over to me and offered me a cigarette. My critical thinking says that's not good for me. That's not something I want to do. No, thank you. So it doesn't even get to the emotional level, which is the subconscious mind. Now, if in that someone says, well, my uncle's 94 years old and he smokes every day since he was 20. Well, now that changes their perspective because they have a feeling that it's not going to hurt them. But you take them into the cancer ward at the VA hospital, it gives them a whole different perspective of that, what suffering can be like. So that lives, and we have the conscious level, we have the critical thinking filter, we have the subconscious level, which is like 80% of that mind's capacity. And then there's a little button down at the bottom of that, what we call the reptilian mind. And that is that age-old thinking. That is that thinking that goes back to fight or flight. The saber-toothed tiger is coming. I'm either going to have him for lunch or he's going to have me for lunch. So it's fight or flight. And actually, there's 2 other divisions of that, which are freeze and faint. And so sometimes when you come upon a decision and you just sit there and you go, and the person's going, okay, cricket, I'm waiting for your answer. It's because your mind is just like kind of scrambled in that moment. They're freeze. And so we break that out. But that's just a very small part of that primitive mind, that primitive thinking that says, okay, I've got 4 choices here. Flee, fight, freeze, or faint. So those all lend into it. When you start to understand the dynamics then of the mind. And as I say that too, I always remember a thing that Deepak Chopra had taught me. He says, please take a moment and just point to your mind. And of course, most people in the room will do this. You go, no, that's your brain. No autopsy ever, anywhere, has ever been able to take the mind out of the body. It is a thinking and feeling mechanism that survives almost every cell in your body. It is a part of your entire being. So that said, the brain is the key element of the central nervous system. The heart also has a thinking process. It's an intelligence center. And it's being able to bring these two together in integration that allows you to have a dynamic to be able to move forward with certainty.
That makes sense. Yeah, it does. Oh, some deep stuff.
Did I answer your question there?
I think so.
Okay, good.
I don't know, to be honest. I think you did. We'll let
We've
the
got
people.
a couple more hours, don't we?
Yes, of course. How about this? People in the comments, you decide if he answered my last question.
There you go. Please.
So I think that's a good place to wrap up. Where can the people go? I think we did this last time, but tell the people where to go if they're interested in finding you or your work or learning more about what you're doing.
Well, certainly. I'll give you two pieces of information I think are very helpful to people. One is my website, which is optimumlife.us. So OPTIMUMLIFE.US. That'll take them to the website. There is a place on there where they can leave a note or make an inquiry or schedule a free 30-minute consultation. Happy to do that with people, help them understand what it is, see if it's right for them, see if we're a fit, because I think that's also true. There's other hypnotherapists out there. I'm happy to refer people that I think might be a better fit for an individual or for an issue they want to address. However, what we want to do is to see, do we have a simpatico here? Can we create rapport to help get you where you want to go? The other place would be just my email, which is youroptimumlife@gmail.com.
Sounds good.
Reach me either way.
We'll put those in the description as always. Any last nickels before we get you out of here?
Well, Eric, this has been a pleasure. You're a joy to work with and talk with. This is our second time doing this, and maybe we'll find occasions to do that again. I'd like that very much. And I hope that people out there have been able to gain some insight as to things that maybe they didn't understand before or never even thought of that got them scratching their head. What we all need to do is try to figure out how to get to the next place. And there are ways to do that. Success leaves clues. There are always footprints. And if we follow those footprints, we can attain anything that we've ever done before. I think just in summation, there's an old story about Dr. Roger Bannister, who in England, was committed and visualized. He was a track athlete as well, that he could run a 4-minute mile. And everybody thought this was preposterous. Nobody can run a 4-minute mile. And Roger Bannister had it in his head, I can do this. He visualized it. He saw it over and over again. And then, of course, he achieved it. Well, in the next year, I think there was like 17 people that ran 4-minute miles. Once you know it's possible to have your dreams, to eliminate those things that cause problems or are confounding to you, when you realize it's possible, you can soar. And I wish that for everybody who's listening, to soar in their dreams, to soar in their passion, and to be able to share that with others.
Very, very well said. Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you. Peace out.